Hello, everyone. This is Ms. Kim of Web Savvy Cafe. You can visit us at websavvycafe.com. And I just wanted to share with you a book that I'm reading that I'm really excited about. And you can get the opportunity to read along with me or listen along with me. The book's title is Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I'm so excited to finally get into the meat of it. It's been a while and I've had it for quite some time, just didn't find the time. So here we go. We're going to start our book club with the preface and chapter 1. So the preface was pretty short, and it gives you some indication on how First Lady Michelle Obama, was feeling during the time when she decided to author this book. So, a couple of the points that she made in the preface included about as being First Lady of the United States of America, that America will show itself to you in extremes. And she was discussing how she had to deal with being cordial to heads of state or just people in general who had said not so nice things about her husband, President Barack Obama, and how then they turned around and they wanted her to pose for a selfie with them. And that was something that she was full of class with. She really handled herself, she stood her ground, and she was just a class act. Anytime that I saw First Lady Michelle Obama dealing with the public or dealing with people that she knew was cutthroat, or maybe did not have her and her family's interest or her husband's presidency, uh, you know, in the best light. They didn't want it to succeed, and she knew that. And so, understand that this is an intelligent woman. She comes from the south side of Chicago, which is where I grew up, and that's my home girl. She grew up several blocks from me. And I have an ideal of the way that she was raised and how she thought about certain things, because I knew that the schools on the south side of Chicago, which during the 60s, 70s, and 80s for sure, were very pro black. They were predominantly African American, or started to be, and they wanted us to know about our history. So, not one of us did not know the national black anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And we knew about the leaders in the community. We knew about the leaders in the nation. And so I kind of have a kindred spirit with Michelle. And so, again, she talked about having to be cordial and how she had been called the most powerful woman in the world, and then in the next breath, an angry black woman. So she's run the gamut, and there were times when she mentioned that she was hurt, and times when she was furious. And so I think that the fact that her parents laid an excellent foundation for her and her brother was just, they hit it out the ballpark, because she even mentioned that that helped her see the value in her story and the fact that her story was hers and hers alone. And so the times when she would reflect, and she said that she could go out on the Truman balcony of the White House and look at the people that were out there taking selfies or taking pictures of the White House, and she delves a little bit into how she feels like she was pushed into public life. And that's something that I don't think Michelle really ever wanted. But she chose to do it, as many of us do, to further our husband's career. And I would have to do the research, but I'm not sure if she resigned from her career path when President Barack was running for office as a senator, um, or was it? It must have been around that time, but I'd have to look into it. But her most important priority was to raise her two little girls at the time, and they were raised in the White House. And her mother was there, and I love the fact that this is what we do as African Americans. Her mother was there for them, and her mother wanted to help raise her children, Michelle and Barack's children, and that's exactly what she did. She moved into the White House with them. So I just think that was awesome. And so when she, when the whole family left that public life, that public eye, she began living in her new home, and she was happy about returning to her old life and or having to develop and working in this new life. And she talked about how having so much staff at the White House where everyone tried to be off the radar as far as being in their personal lives, but every time she would go down to the kitchen just to make a PB&J sandwich or something like that, there was always someone there to ask if they could help her or to grab a plate out of the cupboard and just things of that nature off of one of the shelves. And that it was completely different because now she could do that type of thing for herself, and the home was quiet and there's no buzz. And so I really do believe that Michelle appreciates that, she respects that, and she's grateful for it. I believe that she's grateful for the opportunity to have been involved as the first lady and have her children raised in a home in the nation's capital, the White House, and have her husband be able to further his career and to help, if not just the United States, but just do a great service to not only the United States but the rest of the world. But she also knew that it would possibly be 8 years, and she was good for that. And she knew that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and she could actually regain a semblance of a normal life. And a lot of people want First Lady Michelle to run for office herself. I won't say that she'll ever do it, but I doubt it. I would bet money on it that she wouldn't do it because I don't think she's interested in that. So she realized that when she began the resemblance of her old life as a new, that she had a lot that she wanted to say now. And that was the end of the preface. And so that left me wanting. It was very interesting to hear her deepest thoughts and feelings about what she had been through. And the first chapter begins telling about her childhood, the very early days in her childhood. So she lived in an area in the city, in the city of Chicago. There are different neighborhoods, and this particular neighborhood is called South Shore. And she remembers, and she talked about playing with Barbies and blocks, and that reminds me of me because I was a young lady, but I was also a tomboy, and I didn't like just playing with the items that were considered to be girls' toys. I ran the gamut. I played with trains, blocks, animals, hula hoops, dolls, just everything. And she even talked about listening to the Cubs games during the end of the '60s, and with her father. And I remember listening to the Cubs games and the White Sox games with my grandfather. And my grandfather was very interested because in his earlier life, he was an actual Negro League baseball player. So I definitely remember watching them both, but I think he preferred the White Sox over the Cubs, so that's where there was a difference. And the White Sox actually presided on the south side of Chicago, whereas the Cubs presided on the north side of Chicago in Wrigley Field. Um, the White Sox Park was called Comiskey Park, and I remember driving by there, going to games, things of that nature. But be that as it may, um, Michelle Obama's family, or Michelle, at the time when she was a child, grew up in an area in a home called Parkway Gardens, and Parkway Gardens was a set of buildings that was set up for low income people that needed extra support, and it was a great location to live in. Was not far from downtown Chicago at all. But as the years went by, the property started going down, and the neighborhood started going down, and there was a lot of trouble with people who, whether it was children or grandchildren that did not have a strong feeling and a pride about their community, and the city really wasn't taking care or HUD, housing and urban development, and it just went down. And it was very fortunate that Michelle's mother had an aunt and husband who had their own home in the South Shore district of Chicago, and they allowed them to move to the second floor of their home. And a lot of the homes in Chicago are set up where there's a staircase from the first floor to the second floor that is in the front area of where the front door is to the home. So it's not like a single family home where the staircase would be set off in the middle of the house. It's right in front, so you can go right up the stairs, and it can, in a sense, be a second home. And that's what she had. And I'm not sure if they had a door at the top of the stairs or two doors at the bottom, because I've seen some homes in Chicago that are built like that. But their little family had their privacy, and she talks about how the area up there probably wasn't meant for a family, but that's what they used it for, and how her parents had a small bedroom, and the larger area, which probably was a large, what we would say now is a great room or utility room, and they probably used it as a combination dining room, family room, was where her and her brother slept and played. And that was a much larger room, and so her parents took the privacy and allowed them to be out in the larger area. And it was touching to hear how her and her brothers were, when they slept, their heads were only about 3 feet apart. So her brother and her fortunately grew up to be very close, and he was very he wanted to make sure that his sister was well, and even from baby picture, a family photo that they took. In the photo, he wasn't told to hold her hand, but as a baby under 1 year old, he was seen in the picture, and he's not quite 2 years older than Michelle. I think it was maybe about a year and a half. Was holding her wrist, and she was saying he was holding my little fat wrist, and I thought that was cute because he was very protective of her, and he took on the role of being big brother, and he did it very well. And so the next thing that Michelle started talking about was how her family was a blue collar family, and how her dad was a custodian, and they received help from her mom's aunt and uncle, and that her uncle was a Pullman porter. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that when riding trains was the greatest way to travel during the time, uh, there were Pullman porters, which were men, and the majority, if not all, were African American that were in charge of making sure people's baggage was on and off the train, and making sure that things were comfortable for people on the train. And so that was the type of job that he had. And her aunt was a pianist, and she actually taught and had piano lessons in her home for the neighborhood children. And she spoke about an incident at Northwestern where her aunt sued Northwestern, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was about a music program that she applied for and was denied based upon the color of her skin. So her aunt was no joke. Her mom's aunt, her great aunt, and she talked about how her parents would, every once in a while have a highball and a Schlitz, which is a beer that's well known in the Midwest, especially Chicago and Milwaukee. And that Michelle ended up liking piano, and she would hear her great aunt with her students, and they would play piano, and they were learning, and how the music would just sort of come up the stairs, and she would hear it in her bedroom, and she wanted to play. And so she said that she learned piano through osmosis at 4 years old, and so she was really ready, and she was actually very good at it. And so she remembered looking at the piano that her great aunt had, and she said that it wasn't in perfect condition, and she said she kind of looked at it as if it had bad teeth. But music ran through Michelle's family, and it was just some people's family have things that just naturally occur, just natural gifts that occur in the family. Some people pick it up and some people don't, but Michelle actually picked it up. And Michelle would listen to music being played in the house all the time. And most of the time it was jazz, and that was what was played in my home too. And it was jazz and bossa nova, and I remember listening to people like Sarah Vaughan, and um, let's see, my mom liked Frank Sinatra, and my dad liked Billy Eckstine, and it was just a lot of that being played in my house. And so I can imagine how she felt, because she made a comment that she felt like heaven had to be a place full of jazz, and I recognize that. I'm in agreement with you on that, Michelle. I am. And so she said that school was pretty easy for her, that it seemed like it was a magic in learning, and she got a great satisfaction in learning. And so she naturally excelled at the piano, and she excelled in school as well. And her battle of wills with her great aunt was kind of funny, because I'm not sure if her aunt thought that it was a battle of wills between them two, but Michelle absolutely felt that way. And she tried to move ahead in the piano lessons and play actual tunes that her aunt felt she wasn't ready for yet. And so they would go back and forth about that, but that was cute. She also talked about, and this is a car that I'm used to. She said her dad had a Buick Electra 225, and in the neighborhood we called those a deuce and a quarter. So I remember that so fondly. One of my relatives had one, and we loved to ride in it. And just like Michelle said, that was before the times when you had to really wear seat belts. They weren't a law. And so people would allow their kids to move around in the back seat. And I remember that particular car, that deuce and a quarter, had a large back window and a large area right beneath the window that was above the trunk area. And me and my siblings or cousins, whoever it happened to be at that time, would be actually up in the window, rolling around there, just looking out of the window, amazed at the sky and the clouds and anything else we could see. And so I just thank God that there was never an accident where we were hurt. And I remember going to the drive-in, just like Michelle said, that her family took her and her brother to the drive-in, and I remember all of that. So it was just a lot that was familiar to me as she was telling about her childhood, and I just think that the more I read, the more that I'm going to fall in love with her. And it's not as if I wasn't already in love with her. Michelle's always been a class act. I was so proud of her, as if I knew her, because she grew up in my neighborhood, and I know about a lot of the ways that she probably felt about things that occurred to her in her life, and the part of life that was actually public. And so I can't wait to continue reading it. I hope that you will read along with me or listen along. There is a link in the description that I put for Amazon, and you can either purchase it as an audio, or you can purchase it as a digital book, like on Kindle. And I'm going to try to see if I can find some other locations that might have it. Amazon seems to have the best price for it, so that's why I put the Amazon link. So just stay tuned and continue. But that would help me out if you purchased it from my link, because that way I can continue to bring more content and entertaining content to you, because I can take more time, because every time somebody purchases something from one of my links, I get a small finder's fee from Amazon. And so, you know how that is. It won't pay the rent, but it helps out a lot. And it'll buy me a cup of coffee, possibly. Okay, you guys. Thank you so much. And one day, I hope to be able to have an actual book club where there are many of you there, so that we can discuss it and maybe record it and have it our own video in the Web Savvy Cafe. So you guys have a great day, and thank you for listening. Please leave any comments, questions. Tell me what you thought about the book, the first chapter, the preface and the first chapter only, okay? Um, if you have read the whole book or listened to it already, then don't tell us about it and spoil it, but just tell us what you thought about the book in general. Also, if you agree or disagree with anything that I've said, put that in the comments too, because I'd love to hear a side that maybe I hadn't recognized or maybe I missed. Put that in the comments as well. Also, please subscribe because I'm going to do each chapter and I want to make sure that you get notification of each chapter. So what you would do is you would subscribe and then click that bell so that you'll get every notification right away that a new video has dropped for a new chapter. Okay? And like the video for me. I would really appreciate that. And share this out on your social media. If you use Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, anything of that nature, I would really appreciate it, okay? Thanks again, and I look forward to reading each and every one of your comments. Bye-bye now.